No intro, let's get on with the video. I've already been through my criteria 1,000 times and you've likely seen it before. If you haven't already, don't worry, you'll catch on very quickly with the stat cards. I will clarify that this is an easiest to hardest heroes to rank up with to low Grandmaster, or what was 4,000 SR in Overwatch 1, and I'm going to start off with the hardest heroes first because there's more of a natural progression. In last place, and who I think is the hardest DPS in the game to rank up with, is Junkrat. To explain why Junkrat is here, I need to explain his two playstyles. The first playstyle is just spamming chokes, which work in most rank settings. However, when you reach the skill level where that no longer works, you have to become a sneaky duelist flanker, utilizing your one-shot combo to get kills. Due to the reduction in choke heavy maps, and the removal of 2 CP maps, where Junkrat did quite well in, the first easy playstyle of Junkrat becomes more uncommon. And Junkrat's second playstyle of being a sneaky flanker is already hard to pull off due to Junkrat's low mobility and range, hence despite Junkrat's high damage potential, the unreliability in his damage is what makes him hard to rank up with beyond, say, Platinum. Following Junkrat is Mei. Again, likewise to Junkrat, Mei's utility with her Ice Wall and slowing effect isn't really needed in Overwatch 2 due to the reduction in choke heavy maps and choke heavy situations. This means that you can really see Mei's lack of range and consistent damage compared to her hit scan counterparts, as well as her lack of mobility compared to her flanker counterparts. Now, you can still get value with Mei in Overwatch 2, with Backbone in the Overwatch League being a prime example of such. If you've watched my Mei guide, you'll know these walls as LOS walls. However, the difficulty in pulling this off consistently speaks for itself. Following Mei, I have Bastion. Despite his rework, Bastion actually falls a place from my Overwatch 1 list. In essence, Bastion trades out some sustain and damage in favour for some utility and mobility, but I would argue that this trade isn't worth it. Bastion no longer has the power spike and damage he once had, which made him a huge threat if well timed. Not to mention, his ultimate sucks, even with the Bastion ult bug that I'm sure you've already seen and has already been patched out.
He's doing it again! Oh god!
After, we have Symmetra. Now, Symmetra has actually received a plethora of shadow nerfs which aren't in the patch notes, such as her turrets doing 30 DPS instead of 40, and her level 3 beam doing 150 DPS instead of 180. Whilst this doesn't drastically change her placement here, I think it's worth noting. Symmetra's placement here, likewise to Overwatch 1, is due to her lack of mobility and range compared to her counterparts. Now, there are Symmetra OCPs who are in top 500 who do find success on Symmetra, but for your average player, the hero can be hellish to run. Her saving grace is her faster TP and much faster orbs, so if you can get value out of them, you can still climb with Symmetra. Following Symmetra, I have a situational pick being Widowmaker. Widowmaker obviously boasts the best range of all the DPS heroes with high pick-off potential, thriving on maps with long sightlines like Circuit Royale, Junkertown and Havana. Not to mention, the utility she provides with her Infocyte makes her more than just a pick-based hero. However, on maps that don't provide favourable sightlines for Widow, and more importantly, maps where you can easily avoid Widow's sightlines, like Lijiang Control Center and even King's Row First, she tends to suffer with a lackluster sustain and damage up close. Not to mention, the amount of skill required to actually get picks on Widowmaker is quite high, meaning she isn't the easiest of heroes to rank up with. I haven't even factored in dealing with flankers yet. With that being said, if you can win Widowmaker duels often and get a pick every single teamfight, Widowmaker would certainly move up a few places for you. In the 12th spot, we have Pharah. Just like in Overwatch 1, I still view Pharah as a better, more consistent version of Junkrat, as both of you have the two same playstyles of either spamming down chokes or taking duels, and I'd much rather take duels as Pharah. Her Concussion Blast is still a consistent way of engaging duels, as well as the ability to two-shot any squishy up close, meaning Pharah is just about versatile enough in a multitude of situations. However, her sustain is what lets her down, especially when you get into Master, and especially when climbing the last few ranks of GM, you have to be perfect with Pharah if you haven't got a pocket. The timing of your engages, the ability to utilize cover and rooftops, and the ability to land your shots on squishy targets are all musts for Pharahs at this level. I will mention though that there is an ultimate bug with Pharah where you charge barrage 33% faster, so use that information as you please. Narrowly missing out on the medium section of the video, I have Torb. Now I will say that if we were talking about heroes that only needed to climb to Master and not Grandmaster, Torb would be at the top. He's essentially a more tanky and easier version of Cassidy. His overload and natural armor HP make Torb have one of the highest sustains in the DPS category, with his turret providing some solid utility for flank watching or dealing off-angle damage. However, his range is somewhat lackluster for a poke hero, as it's pretty hard landing his projectile Cheetos, and that's what you need to be doing consistently to climb past Master. With that being said though, Torb is a great situational pick if there's an annoying Genji, Tracer, Sombra, Ball, Winston, Doomfist, or any other flanker on the enemy team, but the heroes above Torb are just more consistent. Squeezing ourselves into the medium section of the video, we have Ashe, who falls a considerable number of places from my last video in Overwatch 1. Similar to Pharah, by herself without a pocket, Ashe's sustain certainly feels a little lackluster, especially compared to her hit scan counterparts. Having no self-heal, a big head hitbox, and not much CC is not much fun. Ashe, however, is still an all-around, consistent hitscan pick across all the ranks, with Bob being a very underrated ultimate, especially in the lower ranks. Not to mention, Ashe's shots paired alongside her dynamite can certainly pack a punch. Her viability doesn't waver too much across the ranks, unlike some other heroes. Moving just beyond the top 10, we have Echo. Likewise to Ashe, Echo is an all-around solid pick with no glaring deficit in her stat card. Her versatile mobility allows Echo to reach positions for aerial assassinations, or Echo can just spam from range and land stickies to farm her ultimate. Speaking of her ultimate, it is noticeably weaker from Overwatch 1 in the sense that if you duplicate a tank, you only have a maximum of 300 HP, meaning you can't be as aggressive if you were to duplicate those strong brawly tanks like Zarya or Reinhardt. Her biggest deficit though is how she fares up against her counterpart Genji. Genji is doing a lot better in Overwatch 2, as I'll get onto later, and in most cases where you'd want to pick Echo, I can't imagine why you wouldn't want to pick Genji. After Echo, I have Tracer. For those who are new to Overwatch 2, or maybe for those who don't know at all, Tracer used to deal more damage in Overwatch 1. She used to deal 6 damage per pellet, but now deals 5. Whilst this doesn't seem like a big decrease, when you are trying to quickly burst down a target, any seemingly small change to your damage can make a noticeable difference, and this is part of the reason why Tracer is lower in this list compared to my last. With that being said, she still has the best horizontal mobility in the game, with the recall and smart cover usage providing her more sustain despite her low HP pool. If you're wondering why Tracer is still played at the Overwatch League level, it's because of her mobility. The lack of stuns in Overwatch 2 compared to Overwatch 1 also make Tracer less punishing than before. What prevents Tracer from going any higher is how easy it is to reach her insanely high skill ceiling, especially with the damage nerf from Overwatch 1. I'm sure some Tracer players can leave some comments down below about how they feel useless when shooting sometimes. In lucky number 7, we have Hanzo. When re-evaluating my placement from the Overwatch 1 version of this video, I decided to move Hanzo a few places down. I also think against dive and or mobile heroes, and in 5v5 where there's less peel, Hanzo's lack of sustain and mobility himself can be a bit annoying to say the least. However, Hanzo's versatility in terms of his range is what keeps him at this spot. Hanzo can play afar or close up at a moment's notice thanks to his rapid fire storm arrows. I would also argue that the utility in sonic arrows are more important than ever, as you can pop your sonic arrow on flanks to make your ability to flank much safer. Just missing out on the top 6, we have Sojourn. Now Sojourn was a really tough placement for me because she is absolutely broken at Grandmaster levels of play. If you can aim your fully charged railgun, she's broken at any rank. But that's not easy to do, which is why I had to put Sojourn somewhere in this medium section. If you miss all your railguns, you're essentially playing a less effective and less consistent soldier. After all, the reason why the devs aren't nerfing Sojourn is because of her lackluster performance in lower ranks. Before I move on to the next section, I'd like to bring on a surprising but very welcome guest from the land of the rednecks, guns and private healthcare, Coach Mills. And here's Mills' thoughts on the middle section of heroes in the video so far.
What's up guys, thanks Care for having me. Now for the middle ranks, I do agree on average these are going to be about middle of the pack for easiest to hardest as far as climbing to Grandmaster, but especially post patch, I do think that some of these characters are going to struggle, especially once you get to the Master's rank. Characters like Ashe and Hanzo in particular are very susceptible to dive, and with better and better diva play, I would imagine that these characters can be pretty tricky to climb to Grandmaster, especially if you don't have a pocket. Now on the flip side, characters like Sojourn and Tracer are pretty difficult to climb with unless you're absolutely cracked at them. Like, once you reach a skill threshold, I think that they are very easy characters to climb all the way to Grandmaster with, but unless you got the skill to back it up, you could have a very hard time because these characters take a lot of individual skill. Now for the most part, I do agree with Care that these would be about middle of the pack, although my picks would be slightly moved around, and if Care still disagrees with me, I'm just gonna bring up the Boston Tea Party. Okay, sorry.
Okay, so in response to Mills, I think he actually raises some valid concerns, with D.Va being a solid counter pick to Ashe and Hanzo the higher you climb, because D.Va can mark off angles really well. However, I would just urge people to play Zarya even after the post-patch nerfs, saving bubbles for a DPS when they get dove by D.Va. As for Sojourn and Tracer, yeah, I completely agree, because for new players, they can be really tough to pick up, but if you're really good at the game, picking them essentially leads to a free win, so I guess you could say that I was averaging out the two scenarios. Before I move on, if you want to keep crushing it in your rank games, I highly recommend checking out Coach Mills on YouTube if you haven't already. His links will be down below. Now entering the easy section and into the top 5, I have Reaper. The reason why Reaper is in here is because of his somewhat high value ceiling, but relatively low skill ceiling. In other words, Reaper can get quite a lot done without having to dedicate your life to him. And unlike heroes mentioned prior, Reaper can definitely work above Master without having to be some kind of mechanical god. To help explain this, Reaper has two main playstyles, the frontline or the flanker. Reaper's high damage and sustain allows him to flex into the frontline playstyle, shredding down the enemy tank, which is what we saw in the Overwatch League playoffs. Alternatively, Reaper's mobility in his TP, and the range buff he got way back in Overwatch 1, for those who don't know, paired with his lifesteal and 250 HP, actually make him a more competent duelist than you might think. And to top it all off, the lack of stuns in Overwatch 2 greatly benefit his Death Blossom, meaning Reaper can absolutely thrive in Overwatch 2. Only issue is that on certain maps like Circle Royale, he's quite a bit less versatile. In the fourth spot, we have Tikatee, who actually remains unchanged from an Overwatch 1 video. I thought the change to his flashbang would really hurt him, and in some cases it can do, but I think everyone watching this video has experienced a bullshit death from a single body shot plus flashbang. Really, it's Tikatee's consistency and versatility that keep him at this high ranking, and frankly, that's a common theme among the top 5. He has plenty of damage, range and sustain, especially with the High Noon buff, where he takes 40% less damage whilst in High Noon. Now onto the podium, I have Sombra. Before I get onto Sombra, I will say that the top 3 places are very interchangeable. Now I know there's Sombra nerfs coming soon and they do look decently sizable, but up until low GM, I don't see these nerfs making a drastic change to how viable Sombra is to play. For those who don't know, Sombra is getting a damage and utility nerf, being able to hack the same target twice, dealing less damage to hack targets, and hack targets being able to use their abilities sooner. However, Sombra still deals 175 DPS against hacked targets compared to the 196 that she used to do. The 1.5 second hack should also be enough time to confirm a kill in both uncoordinated settings in lower ranks and in higher ranks where there should be more follow-up. So overall, Sombra's versatility across ranks and her damage, range, utility and mobility secure her a podium place. Moving on to runners up, I have Soldier. Again, the stats card should show you his versatility. Decent sustain with his heal pad, decent range with his hit scan gun, decent mobility with the sprint, decent utility in the DPS category with his visor creating space, and still reliable damage despite the nerf in the Overwatch 2 beta. Thankfully, Soldier's playstyle doesn't change that much from Overwatch 1 to Overwatch 2, and in fact, it's emphasized more in Overwatch 2. For those who don't know, you play Soldier for your sprint and your range, sprinting to off angles in the mid fight to beam down the enemy team. Lastly, in first place, I have Genji. Now I know people like Necros have fearmongered on Twitter regarding Genji's viability in the post-patch nerfs, but at least until low GM, I disagree. At the very least, before the nerfs, Genji would undoubtedly be number 1 in my books. And if you don't believe me, just look at each stage of the Overwatch League where Genji has been meta. The lack of stuns in the game make Genji a lot more aggressive and less punishing because it actually makes your deflect a useful defensive tool. Just to make sure you don't dash into Brig Moira because your deflect is obviously useless against them. Simply put, there is not another hero in Overwatch with as much burst damage or burst mobility as Genji in the game. It's literally as simple as dash in, get a kill, and dash out or deflect. I myself moved from console to PC 2 months ago, and I've only played heroes that don't require much mechanical skill, and I still managed to dominate lobbies on Genji. Just make sure that your dashes and engages are well timed, and that you can land a fair few shurikens, and you should be good to go. Anyways, that's the video. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and if this video helped to raise your IQ, be sure to share it with your friends to also raise theirs. Until next time.